Hello, Gaston County. Welcome to episode number 139 of Gaston's Great, a podcast, I think, highlighting some of the great things happening in and around Gaston County. I'm your host, Stephen Long, and we are coming to you once again from the international headquarters of GSM Services. We simply believe in discussing more of the reasons why Gaston's great. We are highlighting another great organization this week as we talk about Our Neighbors, Inc. We have Stephen Crane with us today. Stephen is the executive director of the organization. Stephen, it's great to have you on, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you to GSM for hosting these.
Absolutely. Well, as usual, we like to get right to it. But before we get into the organization, listeners typically like to hear a little bit about our guests. So can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, anything that you'd like to share before we start talking about our neighbors?
Absolutely. I've been married for 37 years, the father of two children, both graduated from South Point High School, a grandfather of three. As of last week, the third one came along.
Good for you.
We live in Belmont. I've been there since 1992, and I'm currently working as the executive director of Our Neighbors, Inc. It's a nonprofit housing development organization that works in Gaston, Lincoln, and Cleveland counties. I grew up in Flint, Michigan. I love travel, gardening, reading, and community activism.
So does that make you a Michigan Wolverine fan or a Michigan State fan? Or
Michigan State, go
okay.
green.
You know what? I like to hear that because normally you hear automatically, it's kind of like around here, you hear too much about the Tar Heels. We are not Tar Heel people here. So I would kind of relate NC State and Michigan State together, probably in those in the two states. So again, that's good to hear. So you mentioned again a little bit about Our Neighbors, Inc., but let's go ahead and get in. What is the mission? I like the question is. Well, just tell our listeners. There are going to be listeners who don't have maybe a few have probably heard of it, maybe they haven't, and so just kind of give us your explanation about who you are, what the organization does on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, and then we maybe get into some more specific questions.
Well, Our Neighbors works with the community to provide and improve opportunities for people needing assistance with affordable housing. That comes in a number of different ways. We serve as an affordable housing developer, an affordable housing manager, an affordable housing service provider. It's called permanent supportive housing.
Okay.
That's it in a nutshell. How we do that comes about through collaboration and partnerships. We work with other community agencies, all of them who have a need for housing at some point in their process. People who work with folks who have disabilities. Gaston Residential Services comes to mind. We did 2 projects with Gaston Residential Services. Catherine's House runs a transitional housing program. We have an opportunity to help them with more permanent supportive housing types of opportunities. The recovery programs that are out there, some are mental health, some are substance use recovery programs. All of them have visions about what's next after they've gone through their various levels of transitions and recoveries, and as particularly for disabled families with disabled children, as those children grow up, they also need some place to live, okay? And so we work with those organizations, affinity groups, that will have a need for housing over the long-term period. We've been around since 2003. We've built 166 affordable housing units, some for rent, some for sale, and we've had successes on both fronts. Over 3,100 people have been housed. About half of those people have been homeless when we started with them. The other half all have disabilities. So it's an impactful program. Most people don't even know about us.
So maybe at least our 3 listeners will know about this now after this discussion. So, all right, I heard some really interesting and good stats there. So, over 3,100 people, if I heard you correctly.
Correct.
So, how do you? Is it mostly that these other organizations? You use the word collaboration, which I love that word. and so much of what happens in our community, falls under that kind of, that kind of relationships. But are they contacting you typically when they have a need, or how do you find out about the needs of people who need affordable housing or they need help? What's the most common way that are they getting in contact with you, or how does that work?
Organizationally and professionally, we're involved in a lot of community efforts. Gaston Together, the one Gaston effort, I served on the steering committee when it was called Gaston Vision, served on the steering committee for the affordable housing study with the city of Gastonia. We work very closely. Gastonia and Gaston County are working on the next 5-year consolidated plans, which focus specifically on homeless individuals. And through those collaborative efforts or participation efforts, we meet the other agencies.
Gotcha.
The organizations, and particularly in 2020, a lot of people all of a sudden had time at home to think about their lives and what could they do to impact their communities. And by doing that, a number of individuals started other nonprofits, started organizations that were very specific, very targeted to certain individual groups. We call it the special needs population, and special needs includes people with disabilities, people in recovery, people with mental health issues, people with physical disabilities that go beyond, and many times they're co-occurring. How do we find the partners and the collaborations? It's a constant talk. I have a standing bet with the staff that I work with that I can go to a meeting and I put a quarter on the table when I leave, and if it's still there when I come back, it's usually because I've had to pick it up because I can't go to a meeting without saying something. And people get tired of hearing me talk about it sometimes. They go in different directions, but ultimately people will come back to us and have a chat. At some point we can help, other times we help meet up with other organizations that can help them faster or in a different way.
All right. So when you were describing the organization, you also mentioned, if I got the number right, 166 affordable housing units is the phrase that you use. What, for our listener and even for myself too, what does that actually mean? I think you used the phrase, we help build 166 affordable housing units since 2003. Kind of help our listeners and myself understand what that means. You actually help facilitate the building, finding the affordable housing units. What can you get a little more detail with that?
Primarily as a developer. Okay. A developer will find a piece of land, put together the project, bring together contractors, architects, the individuals necessary, a team basically, to do a project. You drive up and down Hudson Boulevard or Union Road and South New Hope Road now, you see a lot of multifamily projects.
Right.
We were involved in a couple of those.
Okay.
We have built, when I say built, we have developed basically what's called small scale, small footprints, 15 to 20 units, 15, 10, 11, duplexes, fourplexes, and that's our general bailiwick. So the first step is to be able to have the land or find the land, acquire the land, bring the team together, and it could be a different team for a different project. We've used individual contractors, building contractors, home builders. We have used large building contractors, regional and national building contractors in our process. That's the development side. On the management side, we do own several of the properties that we have built. And when I say own, that means also to manage. Okay. And that means we are working directly with individuals who are seeking the housing. And by that, it's usually because of a referral from another organization. So the 166 units are spread out across all 3 counties. Some we own, some we just straight up we're the developer, or sometimes called sponsor. For example, I keep bringing Gaston Residential into it because those are the most visible. Gaston Residential Services works with people who are developmentally disabled. And they have two independent living communities. They're one-bedroom apartment complexes, one on 2nd Avenue and one on 3rd Avenue.
Okay.
And to get those projects done, both were unique in themselves. One, we had to deal with Duke Power on a telephone pole right-of-way that had been in place since 1908.
Oh, wow.
So as a developer, those kinds of things come up.
Yeah.
A lot of times stormwater mitigation, which we call those retention or detention ponds. You're familiar with,
right?
I believe you have one outside the building here when you were building this. And working with the natural boundaries and barriers that are there, a railroad track, a school, a grocery store, which is a high need in our community. The other thing is transportation, looking at what goes into developing the project. So each project is different. Some that we've built, we have sold, and we've sold to people who could, when I say afford these, we bring the cost to the point, not at a price point, but at what can this household afford to be able to purchase at. So that means we have to have the partners, the contractors need to understand that. Other, whether it's architects or HVAC people, we need to have those kinds of relationships in place so that we can find the best price to be able to deliver an affordable or an attainable housing unit.
Okay, so I think it's fair to say that's a little broader scope than I even gathered from spending some time on your website. So you're right. When oftentimes we say, we've had some of our guests on where we use the phrase, we got a lot of well-kept secrets here in Gaston County about projects and work that is being done. So something that we like to ask is a question that, can you think of a specific example or anecdotal story or something where, a family was impacted, or you saw something that occurred and you said, wow, this is the reason our Neighbors Inc. is here. This is the reason that I'm involved with this organization, or a specific story where you're like, that you can share that was like, wow, this is exactly why we're here.
Absolutely. First off, homeless housing. We have people who have been displaced for a number of reasons, right. Some not related to anything they've done.
Right.
Homelessness and being unhoused is not necessarily a choice, although there's a myth that homelessness is people are choosing to be homeless. That is as far from the truth as you can be. Not being able to have a paying job, it takes $20-something an hour in this county to be able to afford a 2-bedroom apartment for a family of 4. Okay? Starting wage at some of our largest employers are in the $17 to $18 an hour range. $40,000 was what a starting police officer makes. All aspects of what I've just mentioned have had experiences of homelessness. I'm a police officer, but don't tell anybody that I am currently living in my car, or I take an extra shift because I can't afford a place to live. These are people who live here in Gaston County. Now, by telling you that story, what we need to be able to do is find an appropriate place for this individual, this household, to live. It could be through a rental assistance program. It might be a short-term assistance because it's a person who's on the middle to upper end of it's called a median income level that we have to work with.
Okay.
So an individual working as a police officer, a firefighter, or a teacher, as an example, are earning below the area median income in Gaston County. That's $63,000 a year. They're between $40,000 and $50,000. Those are folks we would work with. there is a homeless or cost-burdened element to that. Finding them a place to live, it could be in one of our units. They could be unassisted or they could be assisted. That means assisted with things like housing choice vouchers, and there's a wide range of the programs that are out there. Most commonly known as, people know the word Section 8, so I'll bring that up, but not everybody is supported through the federal housing choice voucher program called Section 8. There are private sources. Churches have created their own housing rental assistance programs. Generally, by doing that, the person moves into an apartment, usually needing assistance for a security deposit, utility deposits, which are outrageous, and then we help up to 30% of their income. So most people will be paying anywhere from $300 to $500 a month for a $1,200 a month two-bedroom apartment unit here in Gaston County. And over a period of time, as their income stabilizes and grows, then the assistance diminishes. And then through the supportive services that are there, if a family, and I'm going to stay with my police officer family because there was a disabled child in the household, making sure that that child had the services that were necessary to keep them stably housed. Because one of their challenges was the damages that the child was doing to a previous residence, and the landlord didn't want to work with this family. Right. So that's a success story. We have another success story of a person, this is in Cleveland County, coming to us. She'd been divorced, lost everything in the divorce, had nothing, hadn't been working, had to find a job, got a job with Gaston County. And I won't say which department or anything, but she was receiving rental assistance through the Foothills. It's called now Foothills Housing Authority. And they were able to help her with rent for the first year. The second year, they reduced it. The third year, they eliminated it because she kept getting raises through her promotions. Then she got to the point where she was making enough money, more money, that I had to charge her more rent than less rent. 30% of her income would have put her rent at around $1,300 a month. We made a deal with her that she could afford a house, to buy a house. And as through the counseling that we did, she was able to go through a housing counseling program in Cleveland County, which also works here in Gaston County, through the home buyers program in the city of Gastonia owns that or runs that program. And she was able to get down payment assistance, and she was able in the following year to be able to purchase a home, and she bought a home up in Dallas.
Okay.
Cute little house. It was not a brand new house, but it was a cute little house. So that's an example of how people can progress if they stay focused and if they allow people to help them. Some people don't always want that help right away. They want it when it's necessary, and then they want it when we call it hair being on fire, when things happen.
Okay. Yeah, that's two great stories. So, and I think that gives our listeners a great view of some of the work you're doing. So it's this is a similar question, but in your time with our neighbors, is there something that stands out as something you're most proud of accomplishing in your time there with the organization?
Each time we build a property and it's called opening the property, it's really a joy to see that we can move people in within weeks, less than a month, really, of the units. We get a brand new unit, people love it. People want to see it. That's a great experience. But more importantly, it's talking to the individuals after they've been housed for a month or a year even. We don't have very much turnover in our properties. When people move in and they're renting, they stay there for a while. I get inspired every single day, and that's what's keeping me working. My family says, Steve, it's time for you to retire. And I'm like, every day I come home with a nugget of inspiration that makes me want to get up and do it all again. So keeping people in housing, hearing their stories, and sometimes I walked past a lady yesterday. We have no smoking in any of our apartments, but she was smoking in the designated area, and as she was talking to a friend, and as I walked by and went around the corner, I could hear her say, "I love that man." And I'm like, oh, this is a person that I don't always get along with. And
That's
to
funny.
hear her say that was my inspiration yesterday.
Yeah.
I went back to the office, and I was excited, and I was all over the place, just working like crazy. So these are the kinds of inspirational nuggets that keep me going on a daily basis. I have a story about GSM and our fall service at my personal home, where one of your technicians also inspired me. Young guy, and I asked him how long he's been working, and he hung his head, and he goes, "I'm afraid to tell you." And I said, "That's okay." He goes, 5 months. And I said, "You've explained to me exactly how my system works." That's inspiring me to make sure that I'm teaching my residents, our residents, how things work. And so,
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, we have a lot of great young individuals, and especially in our service department, but across the whole company. We're very fortunate with our teammates here at GSM. So I do appreciate you sharing that. We like to ask this question about the future, and I don't know about your world, but in our world, we used to talk about 5 or 10 years out. But gosh, things change so fast. We don't really do that anymore. We might look 3 years out for things, but talk about what's the future look like for the organization. Are there big plans, or trying to impact more people, or is there something specific? How would you view the longer term outlook?
For several years, we've had a goal of what's called the Small Cottages Project. People call them tiny homes, but they're called small cottages. All of our units that we build are less than 700 square feet, always have been.
Okay.
So when when our organization is talking about small homes, I can build, or we can develop, an effective house living arrangement, a 1-bedroom house at 609 square feet. It's affordable, it's cost effective, it's energy efficient. And the important thing here is that I can do it for sale, very similar in the mode and model that Habitat for Humanity has, but we can do it at a less cost.
Right.
And the reason why we can do that is because the market that we're working in are the people between the 50% and 80% of area median income. These are people below $50,000 a year, above $20,000 a year, and below $50,000 a year, and they could own a home. Now, it's not going to be a big home,
right?
All right, but they could own a home, just starting out, a great starter home, but it's new, it's improved, it's energy efficient. They can build their wealth.
Okay, so are there plans for that type of?
It's a three-year pipeline.
Is it a land issue as well, or?
So our last 5-year plan or strategy was to acquire the land, and a number of things changed. I don't want to get into the political aspects
of it,
but
and thank you.
when there was a lot of cash suddenly out in the market, people were able to buy up land, and we found ourselves competing where we could purchase a piece of slightly or just difficult land to develop for $2,500 to $5,000 tax value in many cases. All of a sudden, we found ourselves trying to bid on projects that parcels were being packaged in lots of 5 or 10 parcels, and going through upset bidding processes and everything else. Once we hit $50,000, $60,000 mark, we were out of the game. We could not acquire the land.
Gotcha.
And when we're talking with big developers, everybody loves the shiny penny, as I call it. And you know what I'm talking about. The shiny pennies, when they come in and talk about their big plans, these are great things. However, it's the day-to-day. It's the small footprints. It's the duplexes, the triplexes, the quadplexes or fourplexes, as people call them, that can be built, that can be attainable for, the 55% of our Gaston County community, and it's a little bit higher in Lincoln County, for the households that are in that income category. So from a development standpoint, yes, the land is there. So 5 years, we had to lean back. We had to sell it. When I say we had to sell, we sold a couple of properties that we immediately put into what we call a development fund. And that development fund is now allowing us to acquire lots, acquire individual parcels, infill lots, and larger lots, 1 to 3 to 5 acre parcels, where now we also have to deal with water and sewer and all the regulations that come along with that.
Sure.
So that's a 3 to 5 year plan.
Okay. What about the organization in general? Something I haven't asked, or normally sometimes I already know, and it's common knowledge. But how big a team do you have that you work with there at the organization? Are you the?
We have 3 staff, 2 full-time, 1 part-time.
Gotcha.
We use interns as well from Gaston College,
great.
Belmont Abbey College, Gardner-Webb, sometimes UNC Charlotte. We've used a couple of interns from Queen's University as well.
All right, good.
There's also 2 federal grant programs out there. One is for younger workers called Next Gen, and it's administered through Gaston College. And the other one is for older workers. It's called CSEP, or the Senior Community Service Employment Program, which is a 4-year program. And the ultimate goal is to train older workers, 55 and older, to be able to work in this type of environment, whether it's customer service or in the industry that we're in.
Okay, very good. So, we've discussed a lot of things here. Is there, before we finish, we'll make sure that our listeners know how to find more information out. What are your biggest current needs? That kind of be the last thing we kind of discussed. But is there anything that I haven't asked so far that I should have asked? Anything like you share before we shift gears briefly on each episode and then swing back around and finish up with the organization? Anything I haven't asked that I should have asked?
Well, we've been around for a long time.
Okay.
We need to be higher on the radar screen, both for community funders. I'll use the Community Foundation, which is very, very active and has been. I was there when they first did the Run for the Money event, and I was there for the last one that they're not, going to be able to do anymore. But over the years, the goal is, we call it funding for food in the nonprofit world. You're out there constantly trying to raise money to do projects. What projects do we need funding for? Right now, I'm looking for about $3 million of investment from communities and organizations that are interested in attainable, affordable housing. Affordable not being a price point of $300,000, affordable meaning 30% of a household income going towards their rent, or in this case, a mortgage and utilities or the direct housing costs. So if people would like to look at us, and our website is kind of weak because we don't have the staff or the technology to be able to do that. And you segue into exactly what I was talking about, that we need to be able to reach out and be able to get the funding necessary to be able to compete with some of these larger out-of-town, out-of-community organizations that seem to be doing great guns here, but are they really?
Yeah, understood. All right. Well, I appreciate that and sharing what a little more specifics about the organization. And we found, I think, over the previous 138 episodes that a lot of organizations do a lot with small teams, and that they really accomplish a lot. And it's good to hear that you're able to utilize some of the, educational organizations here, like the colleges and that we have here. So that I'm sure that's a double benefit to the community, right? You're getting stuff done, and they're getting some good experience in whatever that it is that you guys might be asking them to do. So before we finish up, we're going to shift gears real quick, Stephen. This is we make our guests endure these Gaston County related questions every week. This is really what the staff, family, this is the people that know. This is what they really want to know. This is really probably why they're going to tune into this episode. And we're going to call this the Mighty Staff round of questions, since you're doing so much with a small staff there. Is that a good? And Amy's on her phone. She's not even paying attention to what we're doing here. I just called you out right in the middle of the episode. So for our Naomi's not here this week, and so Amy is back for the first time in how many episodes? Probably like 100. Yeah, it's been a while. So that's why we have Hannah here, to make sure it doesn't get messed up. Okay.
Excellent.
Wow. And I just accused you of not paying attention in the middle of the episode. All right, so we're going to move on. Stephen, first question. What is your favorite Tony's ice cream flavor?
Chocolate.
Man, that's a common answer. You know what? And that's mine. If you listen to a few more episodes, you'll hear me say that, because chocolate is that chocolate milkshake, something else in it.
Without a lid.
Without a lid.
I got the T-shirt. If you have to ask for a lid, you ain't from Gastonia.
That's a good point. Sundrop or Cheerwine?
Cheerwine, but I like Sundrop cake.
You know what? I haven't had that in a while, but Sundrop cake is good. I've actually had Cheerwine cake too, but Sundrop is probably a little better there. How about favorite local restaurant?
String Bean in Belmont.
Yeah, String Bean's good. All right, this is a super important question that and sometimes it has zero application to our guests, but I'm going to ask anyway. UNC Duke or NC State?
Michigan State University. Go green.
That's an acceptable answer. If there's another, as long as it's not, Carolina, we're good. Stephen, what is something very few people know about you?
I swam collegiately at Michigan State.
Oh, wow.
I
good
coached
for you.
20 years and had a number of elite level swimmers, and I was on the U.S. national coaching staff between 1984 and 1988.
Holy moly.
And I did swim for Greg Armstrong with the master's program, and I kind of tickled a few good swimmers in the area, tickled their feet following them in a training program when Belmont Abbey still had its pool before the before the Stowe Y got its pool.
Wow. That's definitely unique. That's a first for that question on Gaston's Great. So wow. So you might be a little enthused about this aquatic center that's coming to Gaston County. So that's good.
My retirement plan is to volunteer at Gaston Aquatics, get my Master Gardener certification through the extension office here in Gaston County, and travel quite a bit.
Well, Donna Taylor will love to hear that. Matter of fact, I think we've had Gaston Aquatics on twice. Once early on, and then once they found the land and really started the building, we had them on a second time. So. And that's something that we're involved here as well here at GSM. So how about a book or blog or article or another podcast or something you could recommend to our listeners?
Well, the magazine that I read regularly is The Atlantic, because it's a nonpartisan. They give both sides of the story.
That's hard to find, isn't it?
It is really hard to find. I do read the Wall Street Journal, and I was challenged a number of years by a close friend to always seek out information completely opposite of what you believe.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
And by doing that, I occasionally watch the Fox News channel. I say that with a face because I have to do it just to fulfill that obligation. And I go right back to where my comfort zones can be. But I look for those challenging kinds of opportunities.
Well, frankly, if few more people did that, you might learn a little more empathy toward other people's thoughts and opinions. I have a couple podcasts that I'll search out guests that have different worldviews than myself, because it's good to I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey, and one of his big things was, seek first to understand before being understood. And I think if more people could do that, that we'd be a little better off in general.
I'm glad you said that, because there's a column in the Gaston Gazette on a weekly basis. Chris Highland, I think is his name. He's a pastor. And he talks about I have to understand but I have to listen.
Yeah.
And that's the most important thing. My biggest takeaway over the last 60 years is that I have to keep my mouth shut more and keep my ears open.
Well, here at GSM, they're tired of hearing this, but oftentimes if I'm doing training or something, especially when it talks about listening, is I believe God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right? We should listen twice as much as we talk, but that's hard.
It is.
Real active listening is difficult, and it's something that I continue to work on. I'll just put it that way. So, Stephen, listen, I appreciate you indulging us in those Gaston County questions. Because this is a podcast about Gaston County, and kind of finish up with a couple more questions, and kind of on that same note, because it is about, we are trying to spread the word for the last 3.5 years about why Gaston County is such a great place. So, besides Our Neighbors Inc., you've been here long enough. I think you said since 1992, if I remember correctly. That's long enough to maybe answer this question. Why would you say, again, besides Our Neighbors Inc., which is what we're focused on today, why is Gaston County such a great place?
There is a willingness by people in every community to recognize and embrace the good that Gaston County has to offer, Gaston Vision, and work to find solutions that can be difficult to fulfill. Initiatives such as the One Gaston, Gastonia's affordable housing plan, the Gaston Lincoln Cleveland Continuum of Care, which I put a copy in your packet, which works directly with homelessness, and efforts by the cities and counties to up their professional leadership. Our cities and counties have gotten really good on the planning side, on their staffing and professionalism side of their day-to-day operations, and I've been truly, truly impressed. And
that's good to hear, because you're somebody on the front lines there, seeing how that stuff is happening more so than some people get to see that.
Exactly. Our local chamber and regional chambers of commerce and all of the community service organizations are allowing businesses and individuals to find a place to develop their interests and leadership skills. Leadership Gaston is a great shout out. There's the Next Gen program, the young people that have come through, the JC's programs, Rotary, obviously, even Kiwanis and the Optimist programs that are still running. We also have 2 very active Toastmasters organizations within the community. So I encourage people to get out and find something that they might just want to participate in. For me, it's going to be that master gardener, and it's going to be getting back into the pool so that I can teach kids how to float and adults how to float and blow bubbles.
Oh, that's terrific. Yeah, and you mentioned Gaston Together earlier. They've started a program a few years ago called CEL, or the Civic Engagement Leadership, which is similar to Gaston, Leadership Gaston. However, it's a little focused more on civic leadership, getting involved with organizations, but all those organizations you mentioned are terrific. I mean, I'm a Rotarian. I'm a current board member of Gaston Together. I'm on the Education Foundation. So there's very specific things we try to do here, focused on that same thing, because we know, we need some new leaders around. And we can learn a lot from. As much as we complain about Gen Z, we can learn a lot from them. And I do every day, and sure have learned a lot from the individuals I work with here, and specifically my children have taught me a lot about how to not be such a big dork. So, so again, I appreciate you sharing all that, because I agree. I think I say this a lot of episodes. I'm a big homer for Gaston County, but you know what? I think there's good reasons for that too. It is a great community. So, last question. I think what you mentioned earlier when you muffled your age, I think. So this was just a couple years ago, Stephen. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Shut mouth, listen more.
That might be the shortest answer of all time on Gaston's Great, but it might be the most powerful answer. So again, I appreciate that, and that's a good one. And I think especially parents, leaders especially, right? Mm-hmm. I think learning as a leader is more important than talking and trying to remind people how much you know, because normally that's when I get humbled, is when I try to spout my my vast wisdom on people. I learned quick that maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. So that's a good one. All right. So remember, the main point here is to bring awareness to your organization. Maybe there's a listener out there who's not aware. They're going to hear this for the first time. Wow, I want to get involved. So where can listeners go to learn more? And maybe just finish up with that. And what are you having any specific needs? You mentioned a couple things earlier, but your greatest need right now, just anything and everything you can share.
Our-neighbors.org is our website. It's not real beefy. It's not real sexy or flashy or anything.
It's good. It's informational. It's good. I was on there yesterday, doing a little research for today.
There is a donate button. It does go through PayPal for those folks that do that. I've not been able to figure out how to use Venmo or Zelle or any of that yet.
Yeah, I had to ask my wife to do that when we need to do that.
Let's see. As far as day-to-day needs, you know what? Something very simple. Most of our residents who do move in, particularly if they've come from street or unsheltered situations, a box of tall kitchen trash bags is what we need.
Really?
And if someone would be willing to donate a case of they're called tall kitchen bags with the ties.
Yeah.
Because people just don't know where to throw their trash sometimes. And throwing it on the floor and throwing it out the door is just not a good thing, right? That is something our residents need all across the board.
Interesting.
And particularly
things that a lot of us take for
residents.
granted, right?
Exactly. I mean, you think about diapers and canned green beans and things, but it's the simple things like trash bags.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I appreciate it. Surely there's somebody out there listening who, and I'm sure on the website they can figure out what to do physically with that. Is that you have a location they can drop that off to you if somebody has the urge to do that?
Our office location is at 512 Willow Street, which right between 4th and where it kind of rolls back into 5th and Broad Street. We're one block east of Broad Street is where the office is located in the Willow apartment complex.
Yeah, that's not far from where we are right now.
Correct.
Yeah.
Directly.
Yeah, right down
south.
Broad Street. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So again, Stephen, I appreciate your time. I appreciate the work you're doing. Any last words before we close this episode out?
I apologize for not knowing that you had 138 previous episodes. As for somebody who thinks they're in the know in the community, I didn't know about this until I got the email saying, we're looking for new content, and would you like to sign up? And so, this is a great program. I'm going to go back and listen to all of the other ones.
Well, please do. That would be awesome.
And see how I compare.
Well, I would say that listen to all of them because I think they're all great organizations. The first couple months for me compared to now, it's almost embarrassing to listen to myself back in those first few episodes. But I still have that occasional and not sure and whatever. But boy, back then it was, I don't know, it's like I was in second grade trying to run this thing. So, but Stephen, I appreciate your time. And like usual, I'm going to finish up with my own thought for the week and book recommendation. And I'm going back a ways on my book recommendation, but I felt it fit for this organization and the work that Stephen's doing. But Ken Blanchard, who I'm a big fan of, he wrote a lot of books, but one of his lesser-known books is called The Servant Leader. And I would just recommend you. I think, this probably describes so many of our guests, including Stephen today, that's really what they're doing. That servant leadership concept is, I think you can't be involved in some of these organizations that we've been fortunate to talk about, and you can't do what Stephen's doing on a week-to-week basis without having that servant heart. And so, again, I would encourage you to go do that. And my quote for the week comes from this gentleman is probably most famous for his book called The Alchemist. I'm not sure I think that's how you pronounce it. But Paulo Coelho, he said, when we strive to become better than we are, everything around us becomes better too. So, we're big fans here. I am personally a big fan, and I think we try to do this here at GSM. It's just, how can you get a little better today than you were yesterday? How can we improve in whatever facet of our personal and professional lives. And so that's why I like that. I like that quote very much, and it's a great concept. So to our listeners out there, thanks so much for taking the time to listen to today's episode. Please continue to spread the word if you can about the podcast, and please don't hesitate to contact us here at our email address, which is podcast@gastonsgreat.com. We're always looking for suggestions for future podcast topics and guests. You can find the podcast subscribe at the website, gastonsgreat.com, or anywhere you subscribe to your podcast. Thanks again to Stephen Crane for being our guest today. Gaston's Great is produced and brought to you by Amy Anderson and Naomi Hunt and Hannah Long this week from GSM Services. I'm your host, Stephen Long. Thanks again for hanging out with us, and please keep coming back to hear more reasons why Gaston's great.